All right, all right. Well, welcome everybody to Traction Thursday. Today we are going to have a guest speaker who has the best tasting pork in the world, or so I am told. So let's give a warm Traction Thursday welcome to Dee Sandquist, Niman Farms.
Hi, welcome. I've heard your presentations in the past, and it's a great venue, so I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs. So I'm going to start with a little bit of history and how I have been an entrepreneur. I live on a family farm east of Fairfield. Part of it's been in the family since 1862. And growing up here in the 60s was great. My summer job was driving a tractor. It was a great way to get a suntan. That was before cabs. So that's kind of how I spent my summers. My first tractor driving experience was at age 12. It was a little two-row, little Ford tractor when my dad said, I'm going to go do chores. Why don't you go a couple rounds? And so I drove with him, and he goes, oh, you'll be fine. I'll be back in a little while. And so that's typically how most farm kids learn to drive is, they drive a little bit, and then Dad comes back to see how you're doing. My first management job was being a detasseler foreman because my dad raised seed corn, so he was somewhat of an entrepreneur. And so that was another ready-made summer job, and I often said, every child should detassel corn because it gives you motivation to do something else. Anybody here ever detassel corn? Yeah, so you understand. As an entrepreneur, so I grew up here, moved away, and then moved back in 2008. So when I was gone, I spent a lot of time in healthcare administration, and I was at Vancouver, Washington, in a large hospital there. I was director of nutrition, diabetes, wellness, weight management, and wound care. And were able to do a lot of entrepreneurial things, which at that time was an inpatient-focused model. So that was very difficult to get some wellness programs and outpatient diabetes programs and weight management programs going in an inpatient world. But I was blessed with a boss who said, as long as you break even, because I was in a nonprofit, go ahead. So that worked. And then along the way, I was a registered dietitian, and my husband had some retail supermarket experience, and he was getting ready for kind of a change, and I was a dietitian advisor for the local Portland, Vancouver celiac support group. And at that time, it was very difficult to find gluten-free products. So I looked at him one day and I said, hey, the low-carb store in Vancouver is going out of business. Why don't you start a gluten-free grocery store? And so he did. So this is in 2005, before you could go to the store and find products like you can today. And so we literally, in this 1,200 square foot store, all gluten-free products, and then you couldn't go online and order them. He had all these phone friends, I called them, because he would call people from all over the country to get people to send products that were gluten-free. And he learned a lot of interesting stories about the people who raised the food, because oftentimes somebody in the family would have celiac disease, and so they started raising, whether it's gluten-free oatmeal or starting bread business for gluten-free flour out of need. And then one day, the president of the local support group went down to Bob's Red Mill, and everybody heard of Bob's Red Mill, I assume. And at that time, he was not doing gluten-free products, and she told him her story, which was she couldn't find gluten-free bread, and she was getting some gluten-free bread out of a store in San Francisco, but it was made in a kitchen with other products. And all of a sudden, she was driving around, had Alzheimer's-like symptoms, she got lost, her husband had to come find her, and they found out the bread was contaminated. And when he heard that story, he looked at her and he said, I'm gonna start, and he had a separate side of the gluten-free products. That's how that got started. So it just took one story. When we had the store, we literally had people that would come to Seattle, and Vancouver is about 2.5, 3 hours south of there, and they would drive down just to see a gluten-free store because it was so unusual. I remember we had somebody from Switzerland. And then we would have what we called criers, and criers were good because they'd be people that would come in the store and cry happy tears. And I gotta tell you, that was really meaningful and touching because they struggled to find food to eat. So fast forward, in 2008, due to the death of my brother who was on the farm, we moved back to Iowa to help my aging parents. And because literally I was driving across the country when the recession hit, and I called my husband, I'd already quit my job, so he had to sell the store and a house on the West Coast during the Depression, which took him a little bit longer to get back than otherwise, but he made it. So with some money from the store, he invested in some farm equipment because we both grew up on farms, and we started farming. So gradually, we did a little bit over time. In 2015, we started with Niman Ranch. We wish we would have done that a little sooner, but it took us a while to talk back and forth to see, do we want to do this or not? So Niman Ranch is a great thing for farmers that want to start farming because it's much lower cost. It requires some kind of a structure. Now we use a hoop building where they can go outside and run the pigs. There are a lot of support from Niman Ranch. And the person who started Niman Ranch was an entrepreneur in the 90s. He was raising pigs. His name's Paul Willis. And he knew he didn't want to do that in buildings. So he was able to connect with Bill Niman out in San Francisco, who had been raising some beef, and they eventually got together, started sending pork out to the West Coast, and it grew from there. So we have, we do wean to finish, which is we get our pigs about 20 pounds, and then we don't do farrowing, which is where the little babies pigs are. They're born and raised in the US, deeply bedded pens, no antibiotics ever. Has anybody ever heard of Temple Grandin? Yeah, she's helps Niman with all the protocols, and so I actually met her at one of their farmer appreciation dinners, and it was very interesting to talk with her, and no hormones. Most of the Niman Ranch, and I'm going to focus more on hogs because that's what we raise, they have about 650 farmers that are hog farmers, and then about 100 more mostly west of Iowa that do beef, and then in Northern California there are lambs. So Niman has beef, lamb, and pork. But you can see where most of the Iowa farmers are. They have their own packing plant, which is at south of Sioux City. But so all the pigs go there, and they take really good care of the pigs. The farmers get trained in keeping calm. The one thing Temple said, when you're taking care of pigs, keep calm and shut up. Because it's really good that they're calm, and that's why the farmers, you'll find, walk through their pens several times a day to make sure they are taken care of. Now these are some of the places that use the products. It keeps growing. They have a retail side, and they also have a food service side. So a lot of high-end restaurants will use the products, and then there are places, Whole Foods is going to start carrying some of their Iberian pork chops, and that'll be in some of their larger markets. So there's an impact statement, and I gave it to Bob. You can pass it around. If anybody's interested in a PDF copy of that, go to nimanranch.com, and it's under impact statement. But they worked with Iowa State 2-3 years ago and came up with various impacts that Niman does. Everything from keeping money local, because we own our pigs, nobody else owns them. And so it's a different model. Last year, I believe the confinement farmers Some I've talked to lost $30 a head because the commodity market was down. That's not so with Niman. They pay their farmers a premium price. Yes, it takes more labor, but it's worth it. It's better for the environment, and it's better, much better tasting. And so they have worked with the farmers and did a benchmark study to see all the different sustainability types and resilient practices that the farmers do. So they surveyed 206 hog farmers, and they did a whole, cover crop usage in the region, Iowa 4.2%, but they found that a lot, that's higher than it would be in any other area as far as that. A lot of people do no-till, and so no-till is a sustainable practice. We do that on our farm where you don't disturb the soil. And so on the right's the average, and on the left is the Niman farmer percentages. So 41% of Niman farmers plant cover crops compared to like 4%. So they're generally more aware and do resilient ag types of processes. So 67% no-till, 38% buffer strips, waterways, pollinator habitats, and they have programs to help students and to help young farmers or beginning farmers. So for students, they have a lot of scholarships, and a lot of the companies that use their products will donate money, and so every year they have a big Niman Ranch Farmer Appreciation Dinner in Des Moines, and they'll give out scholarships to students who oftentimes come back and go into either raising Niman Ranch pigs of their own or a related field. So that's worked out well. They also will help a young or beginning farmer in either some startup costs if they're going to buy some pigs, maybe part of a building. There's different plans available for that. They'll do manure sample testing, farmer-to-farmer education. There's a farmer mentor group for new farmers so that they have somebody to call. There's a newsletter and virtual meetings. And then twice a year, there's an in-person meeting, usually in the end of August and the first part of March when the farmers can get away before they get in the field. Niman has a lot of support for farmers. They have a veterinarian that's available. They have field agents who are responsible for making sure the Niman practices are followed. And then they have other people throughout the, it's just interesting to see how it works because they have to forecast the number of pigs, and that's important so they know how much pork they're going to have to sell. So it's the whole supply chain within the company. I can tell you we started in 2015, and the first farmer meeting we went to, they announced that Purdue had bought Niman Ranch, and everybody, you got to imagine the farmers standing around like this going, oh, what's going to happen? And I'll tell you, Purdue just wanted to diversify, and it has been very good for Niman and very good for Purdue. And they are family-owned, so they don't answer to stockholders. And so they're very aware of sustainable and resilient ag practices and very supportive. And the company is such that if we had a question or a concern and wanted to call anybody from the CEO, we could pick up the phone and do that. I mean, they really encourage communication and a lot of resource and support. So they've done over 450 scholarships. Okay, now we're going to switch to my place, my husband and I. So this is literally outside my back door, and it's one of those days I stepped outside. It was going to rain, and I'm like, if I don't take this picture, I'm going to regret it. So I got to tell you, Jason, it's not touched up at all. It's just from my camera. Now, you got to appreciate this if you're a farmer. Everyone, get out on the road. Our owners leave on vacation in an hour because livestock will find a way to challenge those. All right, these are some pigs that were raised on our farm. They have deeply bedded pens. They can run around, and they're rather curious little guys, you know. And this is in winter, so in summer, that door would be open. So one end of this is open, and that end is closed. This is just a pretty farm scene where you get some corn, you get hay, and then over rolling land in the country. So in 2022, my husband and I were honored to be Niman Ranch Hog Farmer of the Year, which was surprising and a lot of fun. One of the cover crops, we've tried different things. We use a lot of cereal rye, and nowadays we're starting to mix in more seeds with it, so we experiment. Now, this was a few years ago when we did triticale wheat, and literally you could eat this. We had a friend that bakes bread, and so we took him some, and he ground it up in a coffee grinder and made some bread. Cool. These are some turnips that we planted turnips one year with the cereal rye. Now, these were just for one meal for us because we didn't raise them to eat, but I said, I want to see these turnips, and so we had them. Again, another, okay. So this is, you can see the green grass in there, and so this was a year, 3 or 4 years ago, when it was a really wet fall, and so we had to get an airplane to plant the cover crops because you couldn't really get in the field in the time you needed to. And those are the challenges that you have with cover crops. There's like one more thing to manage, a process. Whereas most of the time we use a grain drill and just drill it in right after the crops are harvested, but you have to be adaptable. And then this is just a farm scenery. So next year the crops will be planted just into the corn stalks. That's what no-till is. And this is good old-fashioned anybody ever bale hay in younger? Yeah. And that's something else everybody should do, right?
Absolutely, all day. Initiation.
And it's always the hottest day of the year. Yeah. And so this is my husband and Steve that helps us on the farm. And he started out in 2010 just helping us do a few things on the farm. And then eventually we put up a hoop building so he could have some pigs of his own and help him get started as a Niman farmer. So that's been really good for him, it's been good for us, and it's been really good to see that going. So one of the fun things I get to do is I'm a Niman Ranch ambassador. So once in a while I get to go visit the chefs that use the products. And this happened to be in New York City. And I went there last summer and and we go in the off hours, obviously, because that's when they do their planning and see what they're producing. So I get to spend 3 different days with 3 different reps that went around and just see people. And I always take a little book with me to show pictures of our farm because people like to see the pigs. And one thing I learned, I had pictures of the whole farm, like everything, you know, cover crops and all that, but they always just want to see the pigs. So I started putting the pigs in here first. And sometimes it's fun, they'll say, well, I have 3 minutes to talk, and then it'll be 20 minutes later, because, you know, they are busy people. And then this was in Austin, and this was a female who's doing her own pizzas, and she uses all Niman Ranch pork products on them. This was on vacation, and we were out in California and just went into a restaurant. And look at this, Niman Ranch ham steak. And I thought, well, that's kind of fun to see that on the menu. This isn't my house. So our kids were home one time, and we fixed a bunch of Iowa chops, and that's how they look in the store. So that's comforting to know. And this is just a random farm picture because it's one of those, again, pictures that came from our farm. Steve took it, but it was kind of fun at the time because everybody likes to see the eagles. And Any questions?
Do we have questions? Let's give Dia a round here. That was very interesting. Very interesting. So one of the things, I'm a consumer, I'm not a farm kid. I grew up in the big city of Iowa City and some other cities around the nation, including us. And I always got the impression that the farming that you do, the pork is more expensive. Can you speak to that? What are the things what are some of the reasons why your pork is going to be more expensive than if I purchase just from a commercial vendor?
I would recommend that you buy a Niman Ranch pork product and get the same one from any grocery store, side by side, and you'll taste the difference. You'll see the difference when you cook them. The reason that it's costs a little more is some consumers want, the taste and the flavor, and know that pigs are treated humanely and they're certified antibiotic free.
Okay, so but from an operation standpoint, is it more expensive to raise pork the way you are now, or is it probably equal? Or I'll pay more for a better tasting pork chop. Trust me on that. But I was just wanted to know.
Well, I don't know what it costs to raise the commodity pigs. I know that Niman pays a premium price to the farmers, and it's fair. So example, everybody knows the farming market's pretty volatile all the time. Ours isn't for Niman Ranch. It's the one thing we diversified you can count on. They have a stable price. Occasionally, if the price of like corn or soybeans goes up or down a lot, they might adjust to go with that. But they really value the farmers, and it's a very good model because it's one thing that as a farmer you can count on, a consistent price.
And you're not cramming them all into one
No,
little thing. They have more space, so there's sort of an economy of scales when you have all that space for the pork, for the pigs as opposed to confined. You can do more on a smaller plot of land if you're commercial, but you're giving them that breadth, the humane way to raise pigs.
So these are in hoop buildings, and the picture, the other end of this building is open, so they can go outside. And so, if it's 20 below, probably not so much. If it's a day like today, they're probably hanging out in the sun. So
I don't want my kids to see that picture, because guess what I'll have at home when I get home, a new pet pig. Other questions? Here we go.
I have two quick questions. The first is, where would we buy this locally?
everybody's used to have some Niman Ranch bacon. I don't know if they still do. Iowa City Natural Grocers has it. Whole Foods, probably in Des Moines, would have some cuts. I don't know what cuts they carry. You can order it from NimanRanch.com or Purdue.com. Purdue has Butcher Box was up there. It's like a subscription-based service that you can buy food from, and they carry Niman Ranch products. And then, you know, in the bigger cities is where the bigger market is usually.
Thank you. And then the second question is, what kinds of things do they test for in their testing? You had manure sampling and testing.
Oh, I can tell you, whenever we sell some pigs, we get a quality report back. So they will give feedback to the farmers about the quality of the product. And that's been very helpful to the company. It's been very helpful to the farmer, so that they have people that will help if they need to adjust anything. You'll notice the marbling is going to be more marbling in the product than there would be in a straight off the shelf grocery store product.
Thank you.
Dee, what's the transportation equation here? You mentioned they have a Niman Ranch processing plant.
Mm-hmm. And it's Supreme in Sioux Center.
In Sioux Center. So that's a long drive.
It's about 6 hours from here.
Right. That adds a lot of expense to your particular product.
Well, we have Take Them west of town of Fairfield is a station where we take them, and then they're picked up that same few hours later, and then they go up to the Supreme.
So that's one plant for this Midwest region.
It seems to work out pretty well.
Okay.
I can tell you there was one time, was it last year, he had taken a load of hogs and he had to go back and get them because a storm hit. I mean, unfortunately, in the winter, those trucks can go most of the time, but we've had some pretty major storms lately. Fortunately, that wasn't the case in January because we just got pigs right before Christmas, so they weren't big yet. But that can be a challenge.
Just one more question, which is you buy a 20-pound piglet. What is the time until it's ready to go out the door?
About 5 months.
5 months.
So it's 20 pounds when
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 we
you
get
bring
it.
it in, and then how much does it weigh after 5 months, give or take?
It changes 250, 275.
If I gain that much weight in 5 months, holy buckets.
That's a lot of corn.
Yeah. My simple question is, suppose I'm a farmer. I'm a starting farmer, per se, and I want to start a pig farm somewhere around Iowa here, taking a bit of a land, maybe 10 acre of land, and then start with. What should be my initial start, and what should be my capital, and what could be the return rate in a year 2 or 3? Just a general idea.
I can only speak from experience with Niman Ranch. I would recommend to get in touch with one of their field agents who could give you every information you want. I can tell you we just put up a hoop building and I think it cost around $89,000, which is much cheaper than like a $750,000 bricks and mortar building. And a lot of that depends on how much either dirt work or whatever you have to do under it too.
Which actually brings up an interesting question, just out of idle curiosity, and you may not know this, but what are the margins on one pig? What you pay for it, you have to raise it, you have overhead obviously, but a typical pig would bring in what, $10, $100?
You know, I've heard different prices from different farmers, as you will. So I would say it's probably a better question for the reps. I would say maybe 20, but
20.
I've heard that from some of them, but again, that could
It's
vary.
just a benchmark because it will vary depending on feed and the commodities market and all
Yeah,
of those
there's a
other,
lot of variables.
factors. Very interesting. I saw a couple of questions back here.
I just have a quick follow-up on the testing. And I would be really interested in a premium product that would have a label that's tested for glyphosate, or I don't know how to pronounce that, and the other pesticides. Just a
Okay.
thought.
Do you raise your own feed for the hogs? Or have you thought about or experimented with feeding something other than corn and soybeans, like hybrid rye or any cover crops?
So far, because we have a corn supply, we feed them corn we raise. And then we get some of the soybean meal from a plant, Niman Ranch, which is in Kyoto. Niman Ranch does have their own feed, so farmers can choose to either make their own and they follow the recipe, or they can buy it from Niman.
Good question.
Yeah.
Other questions? Oh, here we go, Ray.
So what's the general population when you raise pigs?
How many do we raise?
Yeah.
So we have, because we just put up the one hoop building, 4 hoop buildings, and each one will hold 200 pigs.
800, if I'm doing the math right.
Yeah, at a time, so that's twice a year.
Okay, so
Because you do 2 turns in a year.
2 turns in a year.
Because after every time, and they're in deeply bedded straw and pens, which is really fun to watch them when they come when they're little. They just like, ooh, this looks fun, and they dive under and they come back up. And so then, they get cleaned out and cleaned up, the buildings between times.
You must have a huge industrial compost pile that you could sell back to us as great soil.
Is
There
that a
you go.
question? What do you do? What do you do with the compost?
The manure goes on a field that's right there.
Okay. And I saw that where you said deep beds. That's what you're talking about. It's just deep in straw. Is
Yeah.
that what you're? Okay. That's
Good clarification.
yeah. Interesting.
What's the bedding material? That doesn't look like straw?
This could be corn stalks.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So it's another way to use a product, from the farm. And so oftentimes, literally the day that the combine goes, the baler may follow it and bale some corn stalks. So we have used both. And I hear that's going to be my new hobby because my husband just bought a baler. And I said, oh, I see my name written on that one. He goes, yeah.
It's fantastic. Other questions?
So Dee, we heard a lot about your identity as a farmer and an entrepreneur, but you're also a county supervisor. And this is a meeting dedicated to supporting entrepreneurs, building the local economy, building a regional economy, if you will, rebuilding the infrastructure of the middle, which is really what this is, right? Mm-hmm. It's a middle-sized infrastructure. Mm-hmm. I'd like you to put your supervisor hat on and talk to this group and the folks who are going to be watching the video on in what ways do you see the county and the supervisors really supporting this move toward more local, regional economic development in line with some of those stats that you gave?
Well, processes that we have now would be supporting economic development, which we do, and then also Pathfinders. So Pathfinders, I'm chair of that, and they do they're doing a lot of water quality work right now and getting some grants from IDLES or contracts with them. They do mine reclamation, and I know when it rained quite a bit, one of the gals was going to go out and monitor runoff from the fields. That's her job. So they're working on things like that. So indirectly, we're supporting those.
Okay. One more follow-up question. This is getting into the weeds, but I know that Ashley has a terrific, at least last time I talked to her, she has about a 50% hit rate with grant writing. Mm-hmm. Could we possibly, for the benefit of the area, the city, could we possibly expand the grant writing capacity of Pathfinders so that we could actually be more aware of the kinds of grants that are available, regional, state, national, that we could bring in? So is that a practical possibility with the way Pathfinders is structured now?
We'd have to talk to Ashley and see, but yeah, we can.
You and I will talk to Ashley. Yes, okay, thank you.
I can't answer for her.
Yeah, okay.
All right, one last question as we wrap up, and I often forget to ask this, but as you look across this room of entrepreneurs and aspiring business and community leaders, what can we do to help you?
I guess if you hear of anybody that wants to start raising pork, have them contact Niman Ranch because they have good resources, they have a good support team, they're here to help you succeed. And what we really like about it is the market is there. This group knows more than anybody, you can do whatever business you want, but you gotta have a market for it. And oftentimes, farmers are terrific at producing and growing things, but marketing is just not their favorite thing to do. So this is why it's so beautiful to have the Niman model. Yeah.
How is that going for Niman? Are they expanding quickly, like more and more people on the coast trying to buy their product?
They're always looking for farmers. Yeah. They have a lot of opportunities, always. And so they always try to balance that supply.
That was my question about supply and demand, because it sounds like there's not much in terms of our local market. Everybody's might have some bacon, but it's not like our Fairfield market is supplied with a full spectrum of cuts. We have to go to Des Moines. That tells me demand is very strong, that your pigs are heading for other markets, for example. So it sounds like there's a big room to increase supply.
There is. Yeah, and I can tell you during COVID, when the supply chain was it didn't bother us at all. That was really helpful.
That's the key point.
And what they did, they were agile enough to pivot because they had a lot of the small restaurant, caterer, high-end businesses. And of course, those weren't open like they used to be, but they have a retail sector, so they were able to do that. And so it was really good.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Dee. This is a wonderful presentation. Let's give her a thanks, not only for Niman Farms, but her work on the county supervisor.